Hello, everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course, I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, this last Monday, January 23rd, was National Handwriting Day, which just happened to correspond with John Hancock's birthday, who happens to be the perfect representative for excellent handwriting. But you might be wondering, what's the big deal with handwriting? Anyway, we really are a nation of electronic correspondence at this point, like emails, text messages. Nobody is writing letters. But here's the thing. Science tells us that handwriting something, whether it's a letter, a note, a grocery list, those things really improve certain elements. It improves creativity, it improves critical thinking, it can help improve problem solving skills, and a whole host of other elements. So, what better time to put together a little list of films that sort of revel in the idea of writing things down, whether it be letters to a pen pal or whatever. So, as mentioned, these three films that we're going to cover today all have to do with letter writing and the communication and bonds that are developed and strengthened through those letters. So, as always, these films that we're recommending today are available entirely for free to you with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So, without any further ado, let's get to the recs. Okay, I'm going to kick things off with a recommendation available on DVD via our CleveNet service, and that is 1987's 84 Charing Cross Road. Now, 84 Charing Cross Road is based on a memoir by writer Helene Hanff. Helene was based in New York City, and starting in the late 40s, I believe, she and a bookseller in the UK by the name of Frank Dole started a correspondence. And at first it was quite businesslike. She was in desperate need of these used books. She really did not want something without any history. She wanted the classics, but she wanted a copy that had been used and loved in the past. She wanted something with a particular feel. And you know how used books have a smell to them that like brand new books just don't? She wanted all of that. She wanted a little piece of history to hold in her hands. And despite living in New York, she just could not find what she was looking for. And she came across this little ad in a magazine she was reading about this specialty used bookseller in the UK that, focused on out of print and limited editions. And on a whim, she wrote asking for some specific titles and specific editions, and Frank was able to get them for her. And so began, again, a 20-year-long correspondence. And this 20 years of letters, they developed a real rapport and a real friendship and relationship with one another. I mean, there's already this sort of air of romance. I don't mean like romantic love romance to it, but there's already an air of romance to letter writing to begin with. I feel, like you don't necessarily know if the letter is going to make it. It's not like an email where it's just like you click enter and there it goes. But there's time, and even the time that it takes to write a letter is very different than the time it takes to tick tack on a typewriter or keyboard. And the fact that they were able to keep up this letter writing sequence for 2 decades is incredible to me. And watching that relationship play out on screen is just phenomenal. And it is absolutely aided by the fact that Helene is played by Anne Bancroft, who is delightful in everything she does. And Frank, he's played by Anthony Hopkins, which, of course, Anthony Hopkins is going to be phenomenal. He's always phenomenal. Whether he's playing a cannibal or a sort of quiet, intelligent bookseller, it doesn't matter. It's Anthony Hopkins. So we see this real relationship develop. We see how they get little glimpses and pieces of one another's lives on a written page. She learns from some friends that post-war Britain is under pretty severe food rationing. And so she starts sending the booksellers, not just Frank, but everybody who works at that little bookstore, little gifts of different foods. She discovers this one, grocery provider, I think in Denmark, if I remember correctly, that will ship to different countries in Europe, and she sends them things that would be almost impossible to get outside of the black market otherwise. And through like these little moments of kindness, and they learn to know one another. It's really, really amazing. And I loved seeing how delighted all of the characters were. And as mentioned, the original play is just a two-person production. It's just Helene and Frank. But with this production, we see the other booksellers, we see Frank and his kids and his wife, and we get a much bigger piece of this world that they were inhabiting. And I don't know, it just creates this much more full experience for the viewer. And I absolutely loved it. I just was totally enthralled the entire way through. And it's amazing that you can get that sucked in essentially by listening to people recite letters, because there is a lot of voiceover work where they're just reciting the letter, the straightforward letter, word for word. And the fact that you can keep someone so engrossed in over 90 minutes is really pretty impressive. So at the end of the day, this is a beautiful story about this shared love of books, because the two of them, they speak a similar language when it comes to that. When she describes the way she wants a book to feel in her hands, Frank gets it. He knows exactly what she's looking for, even if she doesn't have a specific edition or whatever. He knows what she wants. And this shared love of books and this facility with the written word that they both seem to have, it's just utterly charming. So if you like the idea of a movie that illustrates the connection you can have with another person, just about via letter, if you find the appeal of old-fashioned notions or things like that interesting, make sure that you check out 84 Charing Cross Road. Whether it is this film version, whether it's the original memoir, the stage play script, whatever, just read or watch a version of it, because I guarantee you will absolutely adore it. It's a must watch. Okay, my second recommendation is available on both DVD and Blu-ray via our CleanNet service, and that is 1940's The Shop Around the Corner. This is just about the most charming romantic comedy I've ever seen. I've loved this film for years and years, and every time I watch it, I just want to watch it again. So in this film, we are following Alfred Kralik and Clara Novak. They're both employees at a little store, and they have this remarkable chemistry, except it's quite an enemies to lovers kind of story. The sparks at the beginning of the film are definitely more antagonistic than anything else, except there's still that underlying tension from the get-go. Alfred is played by Jimmy Stewart, and Clara is played by Margaret Sullivan, and they're just so lovely together. This is definitely like a golden age Hollywood film. So, it's full of, pretty standard tropes, things that you would expect from the 1940s rom-com, except it also covers a lot of themes that you would never expect to see in a 1940s romantic comedy. And I will get to those in just a second. So Alfred and Clara, from the get-go, cannot agree on really anything. Nothing, to be honest. They have very different attitudes towards selling things. They have very different relationships with the gentleman who runs the shop. They're coming from the workplace from two very different directions, and that is really a huge part of the fun of the film, watching them clash and clash and clash, and still being able to sense and feel that tension from the get-go. They really do have marvelous chemistry in this. It was one of those films that's initially based on a Hungarian play called The Parfumery, and it's been remade many, many times, but The Shop Around the Corner was what really spawned many more remakes that are going to be familiar to Westerners. From Shop Around the Corner, we ended up with a musical, In the Good Old Summertime, in 1949. That one starred Judy Garland and Van Johnson, so another massive, massive pair of stars. It also led to the 1963 Broadway musical, She Loves Me. Excellent musical, by the way. And then one of my favorite 1990s rom-coms, You've Got Mail, starring Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. So this film really kind of spawned many, many, many remakes and redos, and they're all excellent in their own ways. Like I said, You've Got Mail is one of my all-time favorite 90s style rom-coms. And I still like The Shop Around the Corner even more, just because there's just something very, very magical about it. The casting, I mean, Jimmy Stewart and Margaret Sullivan, again, are really fantastic together. But this really capable cast, along with some pretty interesting themes for them. So yes, your base storyline is about these two clashing clerks who happen to have these pen pals that they're both equally enamored with, that are, they have no idea who their pen pals are. They've been corresponding with them, and they really are quite in love with them. Unbeknownst to them, the pen pals are each other. So that sort of simmering chemistry and spark that they have going on, it is very, very real. The real version of themselves that they sort of expose in these letters is still there. It's just there's so much animosity going on that it's hard for them to see it. They're both in love with the idea of love, so they don't want to see what's in front of them. And that's not a spoiler. That's like in all of the literature. That's what they talk about in the trailers. So you've got this layered romance going on. And that's all part of the fun, figuring out who they are to one another, who figures it out first, what happens when that person figures it out, and everything just kind of snowballs from there. But as I was mentioning, besides this, primary romance that we're dealing with, we also have some pretty heavy themes. Like there's a pretty serious thread going on that covers both adultery and attempted suicide. Those are two themes you don't often see in a 1940 romantic comedy. Certainly not a mainstream one, but they are very much themes that are pretty prominently presented. It's not kind of glossed over. No, those are key points in the storyline. And I've always been sort of interested in the fact that was a thing in this. That's when I think about other romantic comedies from the same era, that's just not something that they talk about. And I really can appreciate it. And it wasn't just thrown in for shock value either. It's genuinely like an integral part of the story. Some of the actions other characters are spurred to commit are based on those two things. So, if you're looking for a classic golden era Hollywood romance that has more to it, that, will cover all of your happily ever after bases, because let's be real here, this is a happily ever after, it's a rom-com. But you want something a little more elevated that definitely challenges certain norms within that era's filmmaking, check out Shop Around the Corner. If you were a fan of any of the films that I mentioned, especially You've Got Mail, you absolutely need to watch this movie. It really is so fantastic. If you get the chance, again, available on both Blu-ray and DVD via CleveNet, check out Shop Around the Corner. Okay, my final recommendation for today is available on Hoopla, and that is 2021's Her Pen Pal. Now, Her Pen Pal is just one of those sweet, charming romantic comedies that I just kind of felt the need to add. It is a Hallmark film, so, it is rife with classic romantic comedy tropes, but this one just happens to have something a little bit special to it. I don't know if it's the story, the setting, the cast, but they all work together to make something really, really quite entertaining. So in Her Pen Pal, we are following an event planner who is both attending and planning her best friend's wedding which is a destination wedding in Paris. And Hallmark ended up making this a location shoot. So the settings that we're seeing really are in Paris, and you can absolutely tell. And it's wonderful and delightful. And I really loved that aspect of this movie. Uh, but it also stars two actors, Mallory Jansen and Joshua Sass, who were both kind of opposite one another in the TV series Gallivant as well. If you watched that, you'll find them to be quite familiar faces. And they had great chemistry in that series too. But this one, they just are so absolutely lovable on this. Um, when the event planner gets to Paris, she discovers that one of the guests at her best friend's wedding is going to be her ex, and that ex just happens to be bringing a brand new lady love, and she's not taking it super well. So her friends conspire to get her in touch with this old pen pal that she used to have when she was a teenager. She considers her first love. She absolutely adored this guy, and they are able to track him down, and the two of them meet up, and they just have sparks from the get-go. It's it's definitely like a bit of a suspend your disbelief kind of film, but I don't really care. They're in Paris. It's romantic. It's lovely. um, Seriously, it's just really, really fun. And the two of them, the two actors really do have such exceptional chemistry. There are all of these little blips and throwbacks and shout outs to other French stories and French films, and the two of them recognize that they both love these little anecdotes, whereas like she has none of that with her ex. And it just becomes more and more apparent that there really is something there between the event planner and her former pen pal, and you just root for them from the get-go. Really truly, like the minute they meet, you're already ready for the happily ever after, and it's just delightful to watch them get there. um, as mentioned, this is, a fairly standard Hallmark film. There's nothing shocking about it, but it's really about the execution that I think makes it one of the best little Hallmark rom-coms that I've watched, and I've watched a lot of them over the years, especially for uh, the weeks when I put together like the special holiday romances and things. Like, this is really fantastic. Like, it's a really sweet Hallmark movie. Um, you know, yes, we do have a little bit of the busy, successful career woman must find a way to balance life through the love of a man kind of a thing. But I mean, that's not the only element to this story. Like, the guy in this one is also trying to figure out what he wants, and I've definitely seen plenty of the stories where that's not what happens at all. Like, the guy's already perfect, and she's the one who has to shift the most. And I really did like how it was more of a meet in the middle kind of film, and you don't always get that in Hallmark romances, and so I enjoyed that a great deal. So if you're looking for something light and fluffy and sweet and terribly romantic with beautiful settings, some really nice clothes. Seriously, her wardrobe's crazy in this, like absolutely crazy. If you like things like that, make sure you check out her pen pal on Hoopla. It is delightfully sweet and sure to leave you with a smile at the end. Okay, so those were my recommendations for this week. If you have any recs that cover National Handwriting Day, please, please, please comment with those below. If you have any recommendations for future themes that you'd like to see us cover, make sure you definitely comment with those. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me. If none of these films happened to speak to you, make sure you check out our services. The two streaming services that we offer, both Hoopla Digital and Canopy, have thousands and thousands of films available on them. You will 100% be able to find something that you enjoy. So with that, I am going to go ahead and close out this episode. Again, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye.